Welcome, America, to the Monday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, Amanda Head. And just a quick programming note, my co-host and editor-in-chief of Just the News, John Solomon, is out on assignment tonight. But as always, this show tonight is brought to you by wired2fishcoffee.com. Wired to Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News. And you can head over to Wired to Fish. Lordy, it's a Monday, isn't it? wired2fishcoffee.com and get an amazing 20% discount on their coffee by using the promo code JustNews at checkout. All right, let's dive straight into some big stories to get us started tonight, including Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing his forthcoming resignation and the certification of President Trump's election win up on Capitol Hill. We're going to get to both of those stories throughout the show tonight, but first, let's talk about one of the things that the Trump administration will do immediately upon taking office, and that is securing our border. That seems to be what the left is focusing on, especially how the Trump administration will deport illegal aliens. For example, here is President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, on CBS's Face the Nation over the weekend.
When you say criminals, does that mean you are going to go into already existing prisons at local level and deport people who are in those prisons? Are you going to go to workforces? I mean, how do you know where the criminals are, I guess is the question. And if they're working at a work site, are you going to show up to surprise them?
Well, look, we know where a lot of the criminals are. ICE they're great at this work. We know where some are, but they simply haven't been able to go arrest them because of Secretary Mayorkas' priorities. It handcuffed ICE. So we know where a lot of criminals are. They've been prevented from arresting that we're going to arrest starting day one. As far as being in jails and prisons, we would love to work in local jails, but sanctuary cities won't allow us into those jails. It's much easier to arrest a public safety threat and the safety and security of public jail than out in the street because the officer is safer that way, the alien's safer that way, the community is safer that way.
And look, I know you all are probably sick of hearing me say this, but I think a big piece of the media strategy once the Trump administration starts officially will be focused on the deportation of illegal immigrants and making it seem inhumane. But will that work, especially when President Trump won precisely because of his immigration stance? So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see on that. But of course, today is the 4th anniversary of January 6th, 2021, a protest which was blown way out of proportion by Democrats and the mainstream media, spinning the narrative that our government came very close to being overthrown, when, of course, that wasn't true at all. And in fact, it came much closer to happening when liberals were rioting the previous May during the Summer of Love George Floyd riots, and cities across America were set on fire. But even though President Trump won this time around, the media still won't let that narrative go. Unbelievable. Here's Claire McCaskill on MSNBC earlier.
Well, today was certainly a bittersweet day, and candidly, I'm bitter. I'm bitter that a higher political price wasn't paid for what Donald Trump did on January 6th. Something is broken, and we need to acknowledge that. And the other thing we have to keep front of mind, Nicole, is that Donald Trump didn't win 50% of the votes. This is an evenly divided country. It's about half and half.
Oh, we know. We can tell you're bitter. Listen, the American people saw the entire January 6th narrative for what it was, a lie, and that the government was never about to be overthrown, and it wasn't an attempt by President Trump to do so. And I don't think that we are ever going to hear that being admitted by the mainstream media or folks like Claire McCaskill, unfortunately. All right, time to get to my very first guest of the evening. Joining me now is Congressman from Tennessee, Tim Burchett. Congressman, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, ma'am. It is completely my pleasure.
You know what? This was a big day, sir, and it's our pleasure to have you here tonight. I have to admit, I anticipated that Kamala Harris would be saltier than the Dead Sea. It seems I was wrong. It was very measured. She seemed pretty magnanimous about it all. No drama. I realized, Congressman, that this was the first election this century that Democrats did not object to for a Republican president. I thought that was pretty interesting. But was there any behind-the-scenes drama that we didn't get picked up on via, C-SPAN or whatever feed we were watching?
Well, I think the story is that there wasn't a story. The Democrats had made a lot of noise about what they were going to do, and I think they finally have got a decent pollster, and it's not The View. I think that in these folks that you see on the news that you alluded to earlier, who I've I don't even know who they are, and I'm kind of in the news a little bit here as of late. So I just think average America doesn't pay any attention to them. That's why the so-called mainstream media is being replaced by you all, because y'all are telling the truth, and the public realizes that, and the numbers show that their line of thought and thinking is not what America wants. They don't want somebody that's going to tear down our belief system and our system of justice that people have fought and died for, and democracy and capitalism and all those things that we, I guess, have taken for granted. And America wants all that back, and they know it.
I think so, too. I think all of those things are back in style, thankfully. I want to ask you about the speaker fight last week. Obviously, Speaker Mike Johnson retaining the gavel, and a lot of Republicans are very happy about that and very happy that the drama was relatively ephemeral. Last week, I have to admit, I didn't know exactly where you stood, so bravo on the intrigue. What tipped you over the edge in Mike Johnson's favor?
I think that, well, Donald Trump, he has an agenda, and I think we'll have 100 to 150 days, and the wheels will start coming off. We've got to load the cart. We've got to get united, and we've got to get there. And who that person is that's going to help us deliver that, I think, is Mike Johnson, because ultimately it went down to me was that I find him to be an honorable guy. I don't always agree with him, but he listens to me, and I find that to be, and honestly, I find him to be a very decent human being. And there's not a lot of that in those positions if you look at the history of our country.
I think that's absolutely right. And that, frankly, that's been kind of the prevalent opinion that I've heard of him, is that he is an honest broker. He's a good man. And maybe this time around, because he has the confidence of President Trump, the confidence of retaining the majority, we also have the Senate. Do you anticipate that will allow him to have a little bit more rigor and fervency as he is wielding the gavel?
Yes, ma'am. But also, I think President Trump realizes that maybe that he is somebody that won't always agree with his methodology, maybe with the end results, but that understands the system, this nightmare that we call Congress.
I think that's spot on, too. Sir, speaking of President Trump's agenda, we've heard him speak many times about how, pun intended, that the way to kickstart our economy and give it a bit of a jump start is through energy. This morning, President Joe Biden signed an executive order banning offshore drilling, I think over 600 million acres. It's pretty unbelievable. And he used this statute from the 1950s that will make it pretty hard for President Trump to revoke via executive order. He will likely need the support of Congress. Do you anticipate that he will have that? I know he's got a majority in both houses now, or he will when he takes office. But do you think that he will have the support to reel that in?
He'll have my support, ma'am. This is just a crooked administration, and they are compromised. I remember during a previous administration that they turned places into national parks that we had mineral reserves under, didn't have any business being national parks. And it was after influence from a foreign entity. And you see this time and time again. You don't always see it right off, but with this bunch, it's as I say in East Tennessee, they're crooked as a dog's leg, and they are. And it's been exposed time and time again. And just the people that he's pardoned, and it just seems that nobody's focusing on that and the awful people that he gave those pardons to. And I dare say they won't be focused on this energy situation. But I tell you what, when working Americans are going to be paying more at the pump because of this crooked dealing, I think then it'll be too late. And that's why these elections have consequences. And we better get behind this president. When he talks very simple: drill, baby, drill, and let's get it right here. And that's why he'll be able to control the narrative in Russia and in the Middle East, in those areas, Ukraine, because he understands the economic might of this country, and he can do that without firing a bullet.
Mm-hmm. Very smart. Sir, our federal government is sending $40 million a week to the victims of Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. Just kidding. They're sending it to the Taliban. And this is something that you highlighted in a tweet. It's a slap in the face, as you said, to the American people, to the people who serve, to people who pay taxes, people who should be reaping benefits from the federal government. And yet I can't even fathom that figure. $40 million a week. How did you find this out?
Well, there's a podcaster over in Middle Tennessee named Sean Ryan, former Navy SEAL. He had a guy on there who I know he goes by the name Legend. He doesn't give his real name because of he's of Middle Eastern descent and he fought on our side. And obviously he has a price on his head. And he's been on my podcast. And he, through various channels, he figured that out. And it's not that deceptive. I mean, it's these NGOs, non-government organizations that we seem to give these liberal groups, they're not conservative groups, I can tell you that we give this money to. And we found it out. It's around $40 million a week. I passed the bill. This is what's really infuriating. I passed the bill in the House and I couldn't even get the Senate to take it up. I talked to senators and, it just shows you we don't hold anybody accountable up here, and they just take it's Pavlov's dog. They ring the bell, and the people come salivating. We've got to have some real leadership, and we've got to have some accountability. And I brought it up with the Senate leadership, the new Senate leadership, and I've directed correspondence to President Trump, and I'm hoping that we get something done with this, because I'm going to start talking about voting against everything to draw the attention to this. Because you're right. I mean, our people up in East Tennessee, we voted for $100 million for or whatever. And they haven't seen a penny of that. But $40 million just keeps going out the door every week to our enemies. These people will hate us for free, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Isn't that the truth? Goodness gracious. I want to ask you about the awards that were given last week. It's the second highest civilian honor in the country, given to someone like Hillary Clinton and George Soros. Again, this seems to me like a slap in the face to Americans on both counts, but especially with respect to George Soros, because he has funded so many efforts and politicians in this country who have not done well for America's citizens. Your thoughts on that before we let you go?
Well, I guess Satan was busy, or he would have been in line with those two. Look, the Soros people, they devalue currency, then they buy it back. They almost wrecked Europe, their monetary system. They've done it all over the world. They put these DAs in that are just anarchists. And once again, we're addicted to that money. The Democrat liberals are addicted to that money, and the Soros clan will write them the check.
Absolutely crazy. Congressman Tim Burchett from the great state of Tennessee, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We'll have you back on again very soon, and stay safe in all that snow.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I've got my boots on, so I'm good. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're good to go. Thank you very much, sir. All right, everybody, coming up after the break, Justin Trudeau is going to be stepping down as Prime Minister in Canada, but why? We're going to get to that with Rebel News founder Ezra Levant next. Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. Well, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced his plans to resign, paving the way for a new Prime Minister after almost a decade. Unbelievable it's been that long. But he's going to be staying on as Prime Minister for a little while longer, and here is what that sounded like earlier today.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process. Last night, I asked the President of the Liberal Party to begin that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election.
So what are those internal battles he mentioned, and is there any more to the story here? Yes. Joining me now to break all of that down is the host of the Ezra Levant Show and founder of Rebel News, the largest online independent news network in Canada and the most reliable, Ezra Levant. Ezra, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Amanda, my pleasure. Well, I'll tell you what Justin Trudeau had in mind. On Wednesday, he was scheduled to meet with his Liberal MPs, his party caucus, and they had passed resolutions demanding that he resign. So instead of letting them fire him on Wednesday, he preempted them and announced, I'm going to resign sometime in the future. But then he did another move. In Canada, we have a parliamentary system, and Trudeau asked what's called the Governor General, that's the King's representative in Canada, to dissolve the Parliament. So there's no way that anyone can vote to kick him out until March 24th. So he did a double trick. He preempted his own party before the caucus could fire him, and he had the Governor General dissolve Parliament. So no more parliamentary hearings, no more committees, no more question period. He'll rule basically by decree till the end of March. But even then, he hasn't set a date for when he's gone. So at first I thought, oh boy, Trudeau's resigning finally. But no, he just found a way to give himself, a 90-day staycation or just 90 days with no scrutiny. I think it's a bit of a trick.
I think that's spot on. And, something else that first of all, what you just highlighted reminds me of the whole, I heard that he's breaking up with me, so I'm going to break up with him first type thing. But I want to ask you about something else that concerns me with respect to this, because obviously leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, is very popular, and polling has shown him increasing in favorability numbers. My concern, and this has been confirmed, I married a Canadian, so I confirm this with my Canadian in-laws. My concern is that if Justin Trudeau when he steps down and another leader is chosen by the Liberal Party, my concern is that that's going to have a pretty detrimental effect on Pierre Poilievre's election, because I feel like the Canadian people will settle. They'll say he's not Justin Trudeau, it'll get better, and then you're going to have this, whoever this is, guy or gal, for the next however long.
That is a possibility. It's a little bit different than when Joe Biden was so low in the polls and they panicked and basically selected Kamala Harris. But that is, in effect, what Trudeau's doing. He's saying, well, fine, you hate me, I'm going to lose, but let's see if someone else can salvage it. Trouble is, all the contenders are so closely associated with Trudeau. It's sort of like Kamala Harris and Biden. She said she really regretted nothing being his right-hand woman the whole time. Maybe it'll change things a little bit, but I think Canadians are pretty much made up their mind. They want to change. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives, has a 20-point lead in the polls. Every demographic group, both genders, every age group. I think that Pierre Poilievre's going to win. And you know what? I think we need a change in Canada after 9 years of Trudeau. And by the way, Donald Trump has threatened Canada with serious tariffs if we don't grow up and deal with our porous border. Stop illegal drugs, stop illegal immigration. Now, Canada should be doing that for our own sake, but Trudeau refuses. We've got to replace Trudeau with a Canada First Prime Minister who's not going to quarrel with Trump, but is going to sort of rebuild that partnership again. Canada and the U.S. should be the best friends. It should be like Batman and Robin. You're bigger than us, but we're your ally in every way. We're your number one source of oil, for example. We've got to get Trudeau out of the picture. I think Trudeau and Trump hate each other. I think Trudeau's just a spent force. So I'm sort of looking forward to getting through this, dragging it out. Trudeau, that's what Trudeau's doing. He's dragging it out, wringing out a few more months, and then he'll be a footnote in history, hopefully.
I certainly hope so. And I'm so glad you brought up the Canada First issue, because that's what we in the United States want for you. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but we want every world leader to be Hungary first, Canada first, Mexico first. That's what strengthens alliances and allows for honest brokering between nations. But when it comes to Canada, especially with respect to immigration, Justin Trudeau, I know this has been one of the issues that he has floundered on the most. And I know he claims that the reason he's stepping down is because of internal beef or whatever. I don't think that's the case. I think it's because he sees his numbers cratering. And I think that probably one of the number one things as far as those numbers going down is immigration. Is that your read as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we are proportionately even worse than America. I know you may find that hard to believe. Here's a stat for you. There are 4.9 million people in Canada who legally, their tenure here evaporates at the end of the year. That's more than 10% of our population. That would be like if there were about, 40 million Americans who have to legally leave in 2025. The scale of it, look, it's more than a tenth of our population. Trudeau has let them all in. I mean, there's 1 million foreign students in Canada. There's not even 1 million Canadian students in Canada. It's a fraud. They're not even in real schools. So it's really making everything worse, from housing prices to driving down wages to more mundane things like traffic and lineups at the hospital and overcrowded schools. Immigration is really a hot topic. After years of being a Canadian consensus of having high immigration, Trudeau's burnt that to a crisp. He's also done other things. He's brought in woke in everything, including putting tampon dispensers in male army barracks. So it's like Tim Walz a little bit. Trudeau's also been a big censor. He has 3 different bills he introduced to bring in internet censorship. So I think Canadians are tired of him. Trudeau was pro-Hamas, literally threatening to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he came to Canada. Trudeau has funded the Hamas front group called UNRWA. So to switch from that kind of a guy to a conservative, free enterprise, unwoke, pro-military, pro-U.S. prime minister, it's going to be such a relief. There was a pollster who went out in the field immediately today, and he said the word people were saying when he was polling was relief. There's a relief that this guy is finally going. Now, he's not out yet, but he's almost gone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you mentioned the woke stuff. I remember the first time that I saw tampons in a men's bathroom was at Richardson Airport in Winnipeg 2 Christmases ago. And then one of my family members went in there and took a video of them throwing the basket of tampons into the trash, and I've never been prouder. So much of this, I think, for a lot of Americans, came to light and was really emphasized with the trucker convoy. We witnessed those people being completely blacked out of any type of voice in government, property seized, bank accounts locked out. Do you think that was the beginning of the end for Justin Trudeau, or was it just kind of a bunch of different things together?
That was a real turning point in 2 ways. Number one, Trudeau's mask slipped. We saw the authoritarian underneath it. Trudeau brought in a form of martial law that had never been invoked in Canada, not even during 9/11. As you mentioned, he seized bank accounts with no legal process. So any protester, their family bank account was frozen. They couldn't even buy groceries or pay rent. That was so shocking to Canadians. You can see that's where Trudeau's poll numbers started to come down. The second thing that did is that caused a little rebellion in the Conservative Party. Back then, the Conservatives had a Conservative in name only leader who told all his members of Parliament, you can't go support the truckers. And they said, the heck with you. They threw out that Conservative in name only, and they selected, there was a leadership race, and they selected a more bold Conservative named Pierre Poilievre, who is now running against Trudeau. So not only did the truckers start the dominoes falling to cause problems for Trudeau, to lower him in the polls, but it also replenished and rejuvenated the Conservative Party, got a really good candidate. So I think those truckers in many ways helped save Canada. It was the largest peaceful protest in history in Canada, and it saved us from a civil liberties bonfire. We were really locked down hard, and Trudeau took a special thrill in punishing unvaxxed people. I don't know if you know that, you probably do, because I know you married a Canadian. We had a sort of no-fly list in Canada. If you weren't jabbed, you were simply not allowed on a plane in the second largest country in the world where you have to fly, even if you had natural immunity because you got sick and then you got better. It was so punitive. Trudeau delighted in tormenting people. And I think that I don't know if you remember, but Trudeau once said China was the country he most admired. And in the end, that's how it was. Even now, he won't leave with dignity or with respect to democracy. But I think his days are numbered, thank God.
Yeah, and I actually do know that intimately well about the vaccination rules because my husband and I couldn't go to Canada for 2.5 years. My in-laws, who were unvaccinated, also couldn't even come here. They were stopped at the border by our people. So it was crazy all around. Ezra, actually, I do want to ask you one more question before we go, because President Trump has floated this notion of Canada becoming the 51st state. I am not in support of that. I love Canada. I love its unique culture and its people and its sovereignty. However, is there a way to kind of merge economically so that there's a benefit to both nations? And does that look like something as simplified as the same currency?
Well, I mean, our Canadian currency is worth a fraction of yours. We're actually, the average Canadian is poorer than the average family in Mississippi. That's Trudeau's doing. We used to be actually richer than Americans 10 years ago. I think we have a lot of economic integration right now. We've got a free trade agreement. Our number one export to America is oil. We're actually your number one source. So we have a lot of ties. We really have an undefended border. Now, that's a problem because Trudeau's letting fentanyl and illegal migrants through. But if we can sort those things out, I think we can get back on track. I love that Trump banter. That's that Trump style 51st state, right. And he's sort of rattling Trudeau's cage. But if you start to actually think it through, I mean, take Quebec. A quarter of Canada speaks French. I mean, are you going to have official bilingualism now like we do in Canada?
Right.
Or I got to break it to you, other than some provinces, most Canadians would sort of be Democrat. So be careful if you're adding another California to your electoral map. I think the best future for both countries is to be good friends. And, you know, sometimes good neighbors, they say good fences make good neighbors. We got to fix our border, which is what Trump asked us to do. I think that's a good idea for both sides. I want Trump and Pierre Poilievre to have a working relationship. Trudeau is just, everyone disrespects Trudeau. Well, there's no way Canada's going to get a good negotiation with Trump if Trudeau's on the other side. And I'm a little bit worried about how the next few months are going to go, but I'm pretty optimistic about the medium term later this year.
I am as well. I think that that's going to look really good between those two leaders. I saw an amazing statistic that Canadians have lost 41% of their wealth under Justin Trudeau. That's just astounding. And if I can choose a province that we take, it would be Alberta, because they got great oil and they got great beef. Alberta beef is world class. Ezra Levant, thank you so much for joining me. And everybody, go check out his content, host of the Ezra Levant Show. He's also the founder of Rebel News, again, one of the only reputable and reliable news sources in Canada. Ezra, thanks so much for being here. All right, everybody. And after the break, we're going to take a closer look at the plight of January 6th defendants, some of whom have been in jail for years, just awaiting trial. And with President Trump soon to be back in office, there's hope on the horizon. Listen. Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. I'm Amanda Head, and my co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon, is out on assignment tonight. He'll be back tomorrow. Today, of course, is the anniversary of January 6th, 2021, and we still have many nonviolent protesters from that day sitting in prison, which is an incredible injustice to those people and, frankly, to our country itself. But there is hope for them on the horizon with President Trump's election victory officially certified earlier today and his promise of pardons to those J6ers. With me now to talk more about that is a woman who has been fighting for J6ers' freedom, the founder and director of Patriot Freedom Project, Cynthia Hughes. Cynthia, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for having me on.
So how many J6ers, nonviolent J6ers, are still rotting in jail? Because the last time I heard a number, it was probably 8 or 10 months ago, and it was still beyond, I mean, it was so shocking and beyond what I thought was the case. Can you update us on that?
Yeah, so in jail right now, you have just under 300 people in like the 270 number. And some of those people, are pre-trial still, 4 years later, which is unheard of, very unheard of. Yeah. And, it is.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to ask you about the nature of what can happen for them. President Trump, we can go all the way back to that day and you listen to what President Trump said to the crowd to peacefully protest, peacefully and patriotically, and yet still, literally today, we are hearing Democrats still spinning up the narrative that Donald Trump called for an insurrection, that these people committed an insurrection, just all the lies that you would expect because of the last 4 years, ever since January 6th of 2021. But when it comes to President Trump and his support of these people, pardoning, commuting sentences, how sure are you that that is going to be a major priority for him early on?
I feel it's going to be top priority for him, and I feel very confident that everybody that's caught up in this will have clemency of some kind.
That's great.
You know,
That's great.
Nobody can really speak for President Trump, and we haven't heard him make a statement yet on this, and I think we all have to sit back and wait for that. I know that this is something that weighs very heavy on him, and he is going to make this a priority for him very, very, very early on, very quickly here. And I don't know if you're aware of this, Amanda, but President Trump has attended a few of my fundraisers, and I have brought several January 6 families, specifically the children, to see him, and he has had conversations with them, and he has reassured them of his fight and what his intentions were going to be once he was back in office.
Yeah, I know that you arranged that meeting, and I think that is such a wonderful, wonderful service to these people who I would imagine at certain points over the last 4 years have lost hope. I want to ask you about these defendants themselves. Obviously, November 5th is when President Trump decisively won the election. I would imagine that since then, even though they are still behind bars, that their hope has been renewed.
Oh, 100%. And they've had hope this entire time. At my second fundraiser that I held at Bedminster here in New Jersey, President Trump came in right at the end of the night when we were, ending the events. And it was the night before he was heading to Georgia to take, the famous mugshot. That's how much he cares. You could see on him, he was exhausted, he was tired. He had just gotten off a plane, made it back to Bedminster, and he made sure he came in to see these kids to again, reassure them and talk to them and see them. That's the kind of president we've needed for the past 4 years. And that's the kind of president we're going to have for the next 4 years and hopefully beyond in some capacity, right, Amanda?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just talking to another guest about President Trump being America first. And, when it comes to J6ers, there are, they are Americans. And so I know President Trump will prioritize them. What do you make of this recent confirmation? I think many of us anticipated that this would finally come to light because we suspected it was the case. But the fact that there were FBI paid confidential human sources there on the ground on January 6th, what do you make of that?
Well, I think they're lying about the amount of them. I think it's far more than the number that they've stated. And I think we're going to see that, and we're going to hear more about that in the coming weeks. We know that we've had a former speaker, a current speaker, who have promised to release, footage and everything that the January 6th defendants and their lawyers have needed. And neither one of them have fully delivered. I mean, Speaker Johnson did deliver a little bit. But I feel very confident once President Trump is back in, we're going to get what we need and what these January 6th defendants need.
Yeah, I know Chairman Loudermilk has done a great job of revealing. I know it's felt slow at times, but it's been methodical and finally releasing more and more bits of truth about what actually happened on that day. So it's certainly been good to see that. How can people help you, and how can people help your organization? So we have an organization, as you know, called Patriot Freedom Project, and you can see us at patriotfreedomproject.com. We have been endorsed by President Trump multiple times. We have great board members. We have really good support, fully transparent. Everything you need to know about us is right there on the website. Our objective this entire time, yes, the defendants are important, but the families. People don't talk enough about the fallout to the families. That painting right there, Amanda, if I could switch gears, that painting that we're looking at, that was painted by a J6 wife. January 6th defendant Jay Johnston had his life, completely upended. He
lost his job, lost his career. He was an actor in California, and he has not gone to prison yet. He just got sentenced in October, and he is facing, a lengthy prison time. And his wife, his fiance, made that painting, and we've been trying to auction it off. President Trump autographed that for us, and we were hoping to get it auctioned off as soon as possible. So this way, whatever we raised on it, we would be able to give it to that family, so his girlfriend and soon to be wife can sustain herself should he go to prison. I feel very confident he will not be going to prison now, but even so, there's still a lot of damage here. There's a lot of broken families, women who have had to work 2 and 3 jobs, children with no health insurance, families who have had to move from the only home and only house that they've ever known. Children have had to change schools. We've helped in so many ways. We've paid rent, we've paid mortgage, we've paid COBRA payments, we've paid for medical procedures for kids that don't have health insurance. Of course, we've paid for legal fees. We paid for one of the cert petitions that went to the Supreme Court on the famous 1512 charge. There's a lot to be done. People think that with a pardon or clemency, that everything just goes back to normal for these people. That's not the case. When they come home, they have their lives to resume, jobs to find. Women who have had to downsize, they're living in 1-bedroom apartments. The damage, the collateral damage in this it's astronomical. It's not talked about enough, and nobody knows what has gone on with these families, and that's been our priority.
Yeah, well, thank goodness for your organization and what you are doing to help them out. I am amazed that even since the election, even after President Trump was elected, there were still these folks being charged. And it is just a kick in the teeth to not only these people, but the American people and our country at large. It's just unbelievable. But Cynthia Hughes, founder and director of Patriot Freedom Project, you are doing such a great service. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. All right, everybody, coming up, the media is still drumming up bird flu fears. Why? We're going to get to that next. Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. We are still hearing so much about bird flu, with many in the media wondering aloud if it could be the next pandemic and if we should start vaccinating for it. But what's the real story? How concerned should we actually be, especially since President Trump will be back in office very soon, 2 weeks from today, in fact, and will hopefully reform a lot of the government organizations like CDC and NIH, who made terrible recommendations with regards to COVID. Joining me now to talk about that and much more, world-renowned doctor and chief scientific officer at the wellness company, Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. McCullough, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Sir, I want to ask you about the news alert that you pointed me to just a little while ago. The man in Louisiana who had H5N1 bird flu actually died. How anomalous is that in the context of bird flu?
He's the first human death in America in history with bird flu. There's been about 66 cases or so. Now, I thought he was going to survive. He had been in the hospital a month. We don't know any details about ultimately what was the cause of death. Once somebody's in the hospital a month or two, there can be many, many complications in the hospital. We don't know the level of care. But I can tell you this much, there was no mention of him getting early iodine-based nasal sprays, gargles, throat sprays, no mention of him early getting oseltamivir or Tamiflu or Ofluza or the other two antivirals. And in a paper by Garg and colleagues in New England Journal of Medicine this week, it's pretty clear that those who have a very mild case of bird flu, they get early treatment. In fact, they were all treated with oseltamivir or Tamiflu, and they did fine. This man who died found the birds in his backyard, probably didn't put 2 and 2 together, got very, very sick, came to the hospital late. He had medical problems. He was older. But it's a sobering reminder that we have to do early preventive measures, nasal sprays, gargles, and have early treatment ready.
Absolutely. And you said something that resonated so hard with me because as we were talking about this, I thought to myself, I remembered this infamous case in Northern California during COVID where there was a gunshot victim who they registered as died of COVID. So that's probably my number one question. If and when, hopefully when, we find out more about this patient, what else did he have? Do you imagine that comorbidities are going to be a concern with bird flu just like they were, really the predominant concern with COVID?
It's true. With influenza, it's not the virus that ultimately kills the human. It's a secondary staphylococcal infection, staphylococcal pneumonia. And in the published cases of seasonal influenza, where there's a death and there's adjudication, that is, there's a review of the case and putting together autopsy information, other clinical information, only about 15% of influenza deaths are truly due to influenza pneumonia.
Wow, that's an incredible statistic. Speaking of the gargle, someone once upon a time recommended a betadine gargle, and it seems like that has been recommended for a lot of different ailments. Is that something, first of all, is that iodine based? And second of all, is that something that's good to do?
Betadine is povidone iodine. And, Scoper Listerine is fine. I've reviewed all the gargles on the Substack Courageous Discourse. You could always supercharge it by putting a couple drops of iodine in. The nasal sprays, even more important, iodine-based nasal sprays. Wellness Company features Immune Mist, but also there's Cofix RX, which is xylitol, iodine. There's also a betadine nasal spray. Pure xylitol is a nasal spray, which is clear. The main thing is twice a day nasal sprays and gargles routinely. And people who do this end up going the entire year with getting no colds at all, no influenza,
Wow.
No upper respiratory tract infections.
Wow, that's an incredible tip. Thank you for that, sir. Yeah. I want to get back to bird flu. And, I have just personally become a skeptic of everything that comes out of the establishment medical profession. But with respect to bird flu, do you think that there is a chance that this strand of it was manipulated?
In a first author paper by Nick Hulsher at McCullough Foundation, published in the journal Poultry Sciences and Wildlife, we have demonstrated that the current strain emerged out of the USDA Poultry Research Center in Athens, Georgia. They were doing serial passage research in mallard ducks to try to get it to pass by mallard ducks, and that's how it's spreading all over the country. And when we hear our public health officials on TV or their surrogates, they're never telling America, how is it spreading from farm to farm when these farms are very far away from each other? The answer is by mallard ducks. So the ducks are continuing to settle and fly to these farms and reinfect the farms over and over again. That's the reason why culling or killing mass flocks of chicken, this is about 100 million chickens now have been intentionally killed, is useless, because the mallard ducks will continue to reinfect the farms. We're not going to sterilize the farms from this strain of bird flu. We have to let the birds and humans gain natural immunity.
Sounds to me like it's open season on mallard ducks, which is going to make a lot of my hunting friends in Louisiana very happy. Sir, I want to ask you about some of these amazing kits that you guys offer through the Wellness Company. There's one in particular that I'm interested in with travel, but tell us a little bit about those before we let you go.
The Black Contagion Kit, I think, should be with every dairy worker, every farm worker, those who work in chicken factories. They should have a Wellness Company Black Contagion Kit. I think the companies probably ought to outfit them with it. They should also have Immune Mist, nasal spray, gargles, throat sprays, and just be ready. Do it twice a day. If any illness is contracted, start the oseltamivir in the kit. Now, there's a broad field kit, which is in a real sturdy box. That's the most extensive kit. The aqua marine one is most popular for just general household issues, infections, bronchitis, urinary tract infections, yeast infections. Travel is more focused towards gastrointestinal infections. And then the red emergency kit, I had to use it on a ski trip recently. Someone needed it. I'm glad I had it because we saved a trip to the emergency room.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few of these. And honestly, for people out there saying, well, what if we never use it? If you never use it, great. Praise God that you never had to use it. But it's just great for confidence and just knowing that you have that backup at home. Dr. Peter McCullough, world-renowned doctor and chief scientific officer at the Wellness Company. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Remember, you can go over to twc.health/justnews to get your wellness kit today. And as a reminder, you can save 10% by using promo code JUSTNEWS. That's twc.health/justnews and use the promo code JUSTNEWS to save 10%. Coming up, everybody, the Golden Globes took place last night. Hollywood got roasted by the host, Nikki Glaser. So I'm going to show you some of her best moments next. Welcome back to the final segment of the show tonight. And look, I wanted to finish up the show talking about some of those moments from the Golden Globe Awards last night. Comedian Nikki Glaser did a bang-up job. I will admit that I was an initial skeptic because for all of us, that iconic performance by Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes, what was that, 5 years ago or something? I don't know if anyone can ever top it. It made celebrities uncomfortable. It put them in their place. It reminded them that they are nobodies except on the silver screen. And I thought that it was fantastic. I didn't think that she was going to do that great of a job because on one hand, she said that she realized that she got the gig because of her roast of Tom Brady. So she realized that it was because of her very funny but also somewhat incendiary comments, but that she also wasn't going to be Ricky Gervais. So I thought to myself, that kind of puts her right down the middle and possibly talking out both sides of her mouth. So I did not have high hopes for her. However, I think she did a pretty great job. So this is an interesting clip where she speaks about celebrities and them voicing their support for political opponents. Check it out.
Now, some of you may know me as a stand-up comedian and from my appearances on Roast, but I am not here to roast you tonight. I want you to know that. And how could I, really? You're all so famous, so talented, so powerful. I mean, you could really do anything. I mean, except tell the country who to vote for. But it's okay. You'll get them next time, if there is one. I'm scared. Ariana, hold my finger. Thank you. Thank you.
And I particularly loved that one because it felt like, hopefully, once and for all, Hollywood realized that the American people don't care what they think on politics. In fact, every time Kamala Harris got another celebrity endorsement, I honestly think that it was another nail in her coffin because people see these folks as entitled. They see these people as elitist and completely separated from the plight of everyday Americans. So the fact that those people support Kamala Harris by the principle of transference, they saw Kamala Harris that way as well, despite all of her protestations to the contrary. All right, here's another clip where she invokes RFK Jr. Check it out.
The bear, the penguin, baby reindeer. These are not just things found in RFK's freezer. These are TV shows nominated tonight. And what a night. I look out and I see some of the hardest working actors in show business. And by that, I mean your servers. Yes. Yes, give it up. They'll be bringing you your cocktails to drink and your food that you'll look at.
Honestly, with the exception of penguins, I would like to see those in my freezer as well. Unfortunately, I went hunting over Christmas and it was 70 degrees outside, which kept white-tailed deer in the woods. All right, everybody, moving on to another clip. Diddy, of course, was invoked. Check it out.
Zendaya is here. Zendaya, you were incredible in Dune. Oh my God, I woke up for all of your scenes. You were so good. And Challengers, girl, oh my God, it was so good. I mean, that movie was more sexually charged than Diddy's credit card. I mean, seriously. Oh, no, I know, I'm sorry. I'm upset too. The after party's not gonna be as good this year, but we have to move on. I know it, Stanley Tucci Freak-Off just doesn't have the same ring to it, but no baby oil this year, just lots of olive oil, okay?
I'm so ready for Kash Patel to get in there and to spill all of the tea. All right, one more, guys. If we could skip down to SOT 5, because I found this one quite funny and unfortunately very sobering. Check it out.
And the acceptance speeches have been on fire. Who got shouted out the most? Let's look at the numbers. All right, cast and crew are leading the way with 11 mentions. Moms are holding strong with 3 shout-outs. God, creator of the universe, 0 mentions. And Mario Lopez, host of Access Hollywood, 1. All right. No surprise in this godless town.
Bravo to her. I especially loved that last one. I think she did a pretty good job. She's still not Ricky Gervais, but again, I don't think anybody will be, because it was just scathing in such a wonderful way. All right, everybody, we're out of time tonight. Thank you so much for being with me, and I'm going to be right back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern with my co-host, John Solomon. Grant Stinchfield is up next.